Hey everyone, welcome. I am really excited to introduce you to my very good best friend, Lola Wright. And to be fully revealed, this is our second conversation that we're recording together, because the first one we're like, we need to do that again. Actually, I think it was probably just an excuse to be back in conversation with each other. For those of you who don't know who Lola is, Lola will tell you all about herself, but she's an ordained minister. Her bio says she has a gift of weaving together the mystical and the material. And she served as what was your role at Bodhi? You were
I had many roles there, but when I left, I was the CEO. And so I was on staff there for 7 years. It was a great gift.
It was a great gift, and it's where we met.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to tell this story because we were doing a Gay and Katie Hendricks workshop, which was fabulous. And those kinds of workshops can be somewhat vulnerable and intimidating because you kind of go deep and you're exploring your vulnerabilities and you're getting real and all that stuff. And so when you kind of go into those environments, or at least I'm going to speak only for myself, when I go into those environments, I can be a little reserved, like, oh, like, it's kind of like going back to school again. Like, who's going to like me? Who's not going to like me? Who am I going to be friends with? Who should I talk to? And so we're sitting in the circle, and Nathan, Lola's husband, comes up to my husband, Kim, and I, and says, will you be our friends? Do you remember that?
Yeah, which it's worth noting that is so out of character for my husband, Nathan. I mean, he definitely does lead with some social awkwardness, but like that level of forwardness is so atypical. It was really cute.
I can actually put myself back in the space and remember it was like being at a high school dance. He was like walking across the space coming to us. And I'm like, honey, I think he's coming over to us. Like he might ask us to dance. And then we've just become fast friends ever since. And the reason I wanted Lola to come talk to us is because you are, like, we're very different, you and I, and we're very similar. And I remember early in our years, like there was ways in which I felt judged by you in the way I parented. Like I remember having the experience that I felt like you felt like I was too involved in my kids' lives or talking about and it's funny because as I get to know you, I'm like, this woman is so devoted to her children's well-being and your family. Like it is, you have a lot going on. You do a lot in the world. You're very full. Your life is very full, but really like your kids are your priority in the way I experience you. So anyway, that's why I'm excited to have Lola here for a million other reasons. And we're going to kind of talk about this idea of from fear to faith through the parenting journey. And Lola, I want you to start. Well, okay, wait, I want to say one more thing. So Lola's got 4 kids. They range in age from JP is
10
to mid-20s, because we don't talk about Olivia's age because she doesn't like that.
She would say early 20s.
Early 20s. And you've had 2 incredibly different parenting experiences. So tell us about your parenting journey from like over the past mid-20 years, which started at 18 years old.
Yeah, I first found out I was pregnant on my graduation day of my senior year of high school. I was going to boarding school in Colorado. My parents had had a very public divorce, and I was like, and I'm exiting stage left. Get me out of Glencoe, Illinois, where everyone is now very much in my business. And that was a great gift for me. My dad moved from the northern suburbs of Chicago to Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood, and I moved with my dad. As a result of that, I got plugged into this whole network of sort of underground parties in the Chicago hip hop scene. And it really was a giant gift in my life. I actually say very frequently that my first spiritual awakening was by way of the Chicago hip hop community. And I am eternally grateful for that community of artists and activists and organizers. That's where I met my older children's father. So I first met him when I was 16. I got pregnant when I was 18, had a miscarriage the summer between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, promptly got pregnant by him again my freshman year of college when I was a freshman at Loyola Chicago, which was a whole other detour that happened as a result of my first pregnancy. And I got very clear instructions from my dad. They were, you can have an abortion and you will retain all financial support, or you can move forward with this pregnancy and you will lose everything. And it was very clear for me in my soul, in spite of the profound levels of fear that were, coinciding that entire experience, that I was to move forward with this pregnancy. And I now understand sort of the layers of that experience on a much deeper level. And I'll just say, as a sort of footnote to that, I really had a disruptive experience, the loss of my family at age 13. And I think unconsciously, or perhaps even consciously, by 18, I was like trying to recreate an experience of family.
Makes sense.
And so, yeah. And so I did that, and had my first child at the age of 19. Their dad and I were together for 6 years. We ended up having 2 kids. So by 22, I was, by that point, essentially like a single mom of 2 little kids. We were raised in very, very different backgrounds. I'm like white woman raised east of Sheridan Road in Glencoe, Illinois, with country clubs and private school education and, all the things. And he's a Black man that was raised in public housing in the city of Chicago and had a very, very different experience from me and me from him. And we're now very connected and close and committed partners, but that was after 2 decades of a very challenging, volatile relationship that was riddled with addiction and violence and that sort of thing. So the move from fear to faith for me as a parent is ongoing. It hasn't occurred as like a moment in time. It's been very dynamic.
Yeah, I want to pause you there for a moment. And for anyone listening in, I want you to stop and think about already all the judgments you have made or can even be aware of as you're hearing Lola tell her story, and all the ways in which we can make what was happening at the time like a terrible catastrophe. Like nothing could be worse than like this dichotomy of this union of these 2 people. We can make up all these stories about, white North Shore girl, Black man, South Side, shouldn't be together. Like, this is bad, this is wrong. Like all the things that our mind has been conditioned to think and believe. And then the ways in which, if it were your child, right? If you're listening in and your child shows up at your doorstep pregnant at 18 years old, you've just spent thousands of dollars educating them in a private school education because you have a vision for their life. Like you have that vision. And all of a sudden their life choices have completely effed that up, right? How fucking scary. So like your dad makes some sense to me. I can see how all of a sudden his whole vision has been disrupted.
Totally. Yeah, first disrupted by my mom, his wife, in a pretty upsetting divorce scenario, then further disrupted by his daughter. Nothing was going as planned. Everything was rightly organized from his perspective. He had arrived. He had like the perfect scenario. And then these 2 women just screw the whole thing up. I think that's how it occurs for him.
Well, exactly. It's like, wait a minute here, people. I
Uh-huh.
had a plan.
Uh-huh.
And what are you doing over there to just screw up my plan? So, this idea of faith, I want to keep weaving it in because the universe
Mhm.
really had a much bigger plan.
Yeah.
And even though you couldn't see it at the time and you were experiencing a fair amount of suffering and
Mhm.
struggle, it
Yes,
was
absolutely.
inside of something larger wanting to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And there my older children's father, while his family roots were from the South Side, he was raised in public housing on the North Side. And so as someone who came then from Lincoln Park and he was in Rogers Park, just to understand the different worlds that exist on Chicago's North Side. We talk so much about the North Side, the South Side, the West Side, but just within the North Side, there are so many different worlds occurring.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was a very destabilizing, exhilarating, challenging experience to have that level of change and disruption and risk taking. I mean, I literally went from boarding school to welfare. That was how that went. And I'll never forget my aunt driving me to a WIC office in Humboldt Park. For those of you who don't know what WIC is, it's a government program called Women, Infants, and Children. And it's, basically government subsidized food access and healthcare access and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it was just a big, here my aunt is driving in from Highland Park to take me to Humboldt Park for, my welfare appointment. It was
So bizarre.
a really big adjustment. And even while I had this child in utero, I was aware somatically that I had a responsibility to manage my fear such that it didn't pervade the literal water she was swimming in my body. And so
How
I've
did, like,
had,
what, how did you, how, how?
yeah, I mean, I was raised in a family that was very curious. My mom's side of the family, my grandparents lived on sacred land in New Mexico. My grandfather was a former chemist that was like really committed to preservation efforts of sacred land. He was a Rumi meditator. So it wasn't like out of nowhere. I had a consciousness of mind body connection and
Got it.
agency and that sort of thing. So I just knew, like, I would put headphones on my belly of Enya and just play it over and over. And it was my access to peace. I was like, my
Uh-huh.
whole life was volatile and scary. I mean, really quite scary. But what I knew I could influence as best I could was the in utero experience of my child Olivia. And so I would just have her listen to Enya on repeat. And
What was your
yeah,
biggest fear back then? Do you remember?
uh, I think it was both financial insecurity. So, there was like a real threat of poverty that I was living in, violence. It was a very violent household. And so, and also just like I'm a baby at this point. I'm 18. And all of a sudden I went from this like really comfortable life in a doorman building in Lincoln Park that my dad had gotten for me to, Rogers Park, which 20 some odd years ago was a very different experience than today. I mean, there weren't the grocery stores that exist there now, et cetera. Whole Foods hadn't moved in.
Foods wasn't a thing.
And
But Lola,
yeah.
like, what? Sorry, I'm adjusting my body. Did you not even contemplate, this idea of aborting this baby? That never entered your mind?
I mean, it entered my mind like, yeah, I mean, I was like, okay, well, I could have an abortion. I could give this baby up for adoption. My parents had different friends that were sort of vying for different outcomes.
Yeah.
And I very distinctly remember one of my mom's best friends saying, you're going to end up calling us in a few years asking us for money because you've now put yourself in this situation. And in that moment, I literally remember where I was standing. And I said internally, I will never ask anyone for help ever. And I lived by that
Yeah, you
pretty
have.
devotedly for many, many years. And, so, it created a lot of havoc in my life. It's a pretty rough life to not have to ask for help.
Yeah.
And, and it was simultaneously a great gift to cultivate that level of knowing in my own capacity and my own abilities. So, I would say, like, I actually said this to my mom 2 or 3 days ago. She's navigating changes in her life with aging, and that sort of thing. And I just said to her, nothing that we're dealing with today as a family will ever compare to the experience that I had as a very scared young mother at 18, 19, 20,
Mhm.
21, 22, 23. And so that's a gift to me. I wouldn't want it for anyone, but the gift is I just have such a deep knowing at this point because my life is infinitely more stable and comfortable than it ever was. Now, that being said, I'm still always unwinding
Yeah.
that experience that lives in my body. It's not like you have an experience of that kind of disruption or fear, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm so grateful. Now I have a comfortable home and food in the fridge and all is well. It's like, at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember very distinctly like going into a deep fear of enoughness. Like
Mhm.
I really got the like hoarding of food, hoarding of
Yeah.
paper products. Like as someone who literally has had the experience of not having enough at that very basic survival
Yeah.
level, that makes sense to me. And that doesn't just like poof, go away.
No, but your level of awareness around it, like that moment that your mom's friend or your dad's friend or family friend said to you, in a few years, like that
Hmm.
pointing finger, judgmental. And I imagine that every being on the planet would respond differently to
Hmm.
that threat, right? Because it was essentially a threat.
Hmm.
And whoever that person was delivering that threat had some agenda in her mind
Yeah,
around.
and she was scared too. She was, my dad's response, her response, it was all the best leverage they had access to
Right. And
produce the outcome they wanted.
the outcome they wanted, that, by the way, they probably believed was best for you and
Yeah.
for all involved. So, the other thing I kind of want to put an exclamation point on right now is, as we're all navigating our parenting journeys and our journeys being parented,
Hmm.
like everyone's got the best intentions in mind and
Totally.
heart. And to what extent your consciousness is kind of holding you hostage in your fears, you're only
Hmm.
available for so much. And so she was just over there, like, I use this example a lot, like you're sort of drowning, like
Hmm.
putting your head above the water and trying to, like, get the life vest so you can feel like you can stay above water. Like,
Hmm.
we're just afraid. We're just afraid
Hmm.
and trying to figure out how to keep ourselves and our kids safe and thriving in every given
Hmm.
moment. And the formula you dialed up did not look like the right formula for
Hmm.
thriving.
That's right.
But
Yeah, that's right.
here you are now, 20 some odd years later, as an example of how often our suffering or our struggle could really lead us to our own liberation.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I'm very grateful that something in me knew at that time that I had to listen to the wisdom that was in me over the fear or the control or the worry or the doubt that lived in those around me. That was a great gift that I had at the time that has served me over and over and over again, to just know, like, okay, I hear all of this concern. And I think that that's a really an invitation for us as parents too. Like, would we be willing to consider that despite how wise we may be by virtue of our own lived experience, that our kids, even at 15, 16, 17, 18, I mean, from the time they're born, have a knowing within them, have a
Mm-hmm.
wisdom within them. And it is a gift to the extent that we can guide and love and nurture them to the best of our ability. And ultimately, it is their life. It is their life. And I asserted that pretty clearly by my choices. And then my parents got to choose the extent to which they wanted to be involved. And I look at that with my kids now. It's like, I really trust their process, even if it doesn't make sense to me all the time, even if I wish it was a little more buttoned up, neatly packaged with a nice ribbon on top. I really do trust that there is something within them that knows. There is a soul's appointment that has been pressed into
Yeah.
them this lifetime that they have a responsibility to listen to. And I have a responsibility to help them learn to listen to it as best I can. And
Yeah,
that
and
for me is
honor
sort
it.
of, yeah. And that really is the big leap, I think, from fear to faith. Like the faith comes from the idea, we'll say these adages or these platitudes like you are whole, perfect, and complete, but it's like, do you really get what that means when you
Yes.
assert that someone is whole, perfect, and complete? That ancient wisdom is
Mhm.
unconditional, meaning it is not dependent on condition. My wholeness was the truth of who I am
Yeah.
at that time, independent of what I chose. And so we have a responsibility, I think, to the best of our ability, to perceive our children as whole and holy, even if we don't agree with their choices. And that doesn't mean we co-sign on things that we're like, excuse me, no.
Right,
But
but this idea also, so I want to back up a little bit and talk about wholeness and what that really means, because I think the misnomer could be like everything looks neat and tidy,
mhm,
and for years I taught mindfulness, and so many parents believe, or adults believe, like mindfulness is like being kind and being
yes.
compassionate and absent of anger or absent of any disruption. And what I would say is, this invitation that you had at 18 years old, that was here to sort of wake you up to your strength and to your power, and
Mhm,
that the suffering was a very necessary
mhm,
tool to, for you to rise up to meet those things
mhm.
and those qualities that you then needed to continue to support the expansion of who you were to be in this world.
Yes.
And the way in which I think so many of us parent today is like, we want to make things as neat and
Mhm,
tidy and easeful as
mhm,
possible,
mhm,
such that our kids suffer as little as possible.
mhm.
And I would say that's a formula for as little growth
Totally.
as possible.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it really is such a practice in letting go of control. We create safety or the illusion of safety for ourselves through the exercise of control.
Yeah.
And it is so flawed. It really is flawed. So, this idea of wholeness, I really like to remind us of this. In modern Judeo Christian in this modern Judeo-Christian world, we've developed a theology that is based on a fall and redemption paradigm. And so that fundamentally means that you're a sinner or you're wounded or you're broken. And then you're going to spend your entire life redeeming yourself, hopefully, with that in mind. Much more ancient than a fall and redemption theology of you being a sinner that needs to be saved, which, by the way, was only created at the time of the French Revolution as a power structure. I digress, but like much more ancient than that is a creationist paradigm, which is this notion of your spiritual nature, your holy nature as playful, joyous, possible, imaginative. And that preceded, like just in a historical context, that
Yes.
paradigm is much more ancient than this fall and redemption theology. And it's important to understand that, I think, in the conversation of wholeness and through the lens of parenting. Because if we can really trust the essence of each being, if we can really trust the soul's journey for every being, that is faith. And
Mhm.
as we're living in this
Yes.
time where, historically or in more modern history, we've used like a religious framework to make sense of reality.
Yeah.
Religion is progressively and swiftly deconstructing in the way that we have known it in more modern history. Then the question becomes, So how do you make sense of reality? These are sort of like existential inquiries. And if you don't have a context or a framework, which is why I think you as a teacher, you're so powerful, it gives us a lens through which to understand reality. And so, yeah, that to me is it fundamentally. Like, you actually can choose to relate to your child, your partner, your parents, your friends as whole and holy versus wounded and broken in need of your brilliance to save them.
Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. And what I want to add to that is, we've all been conditioned, or many of us have been conditioned from religious backgrounds that survive on the paradigm that there are these polarities of right, wrong, good, bad, such that we find some sort of safety or security. And we're forgetting that that safety and security is our sort of holy self.
Yes.
And it's not achieved out there.
Yes.
It's found in here. And as parents, we're afraid that our kids don't actually know what it feels like to be whole. So we start to tell them, and then we create this land of judgment, right? You're good, you're bad, that's right, that's wrong, that's going to lead you. And we forget. So I often ask parents that I'm talking to, is like, ask yourself the question, what if there was no such thing as right or wrong or good or bad? What if Lola getting pregnant at 18 is perfect? And upon reflection, of course, you can look back and go, oh, wow, I can actually now see how that was a divine appointment, not only for myself, but for all those that were involved. And if we get out of the fear that we're so mired in, that is our culture, right? Our cultural judgments, our conditioning, all the things that layer on top of our wholeness, and just start to get curious. I have found I feel so much lighter and freer.
Totally. Yeah. It's like, in a scriptural, it's a scriptural reference that comes from the 12-step programs. It's like, turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand it. And we could, turn your will and your life over to the care of life as you understand it. So if life is benevolent, if life is kind, if life is generous, if life is loving, and of course, the world that we live in will give you all kinds of evidence to believe that that is not true. And that's highly adrenalized, and it's really good business. If you keep people scared, if you keep people on a hamster wheel of fear, you can sell them lots of crap,
and control them.
Totally. And so it's not nearly as good a business opportunity to have people believe they're whole, holy, perfect, and complete. It's like, what the hell are you going to sell them otherwise?
How do we get them to do what we want them to do then?
Yeah.
Like, how? Yeah. This is, and I also want to point out that you and I we're here talking about these theoretical concepts and how to apply them to parenting.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, like, it doesn't mean that neither you or I experience fear. Like, I can understand cognitively that fear is an unnecessary tool in my parenting toolbox. It doesn't mean I don't use it every now and then. It doesn't mean I don't fall into patterns of fear. It doesn't mean that I still don't try and control my kids, because I do.
Totally.
But I'm like, my job is to just build that awareness for how I'm falling in the trap and kind of get myself back up over and over and over again. And I'm so guilty of meddling and controlling and, micromanaging the outcome for my kids. Because, by the way, I believed I knew what was best for them. Like, so go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just thinking about when my son Trey was in high school and he was going through the college process. He was a 2-athlete student. He, had written like award-winning essays. He never really applied himself. He wasn't really into the whole school thing. But he could do enough in that system of education to be, successful. But he didn't really take the college process very seriously. And so he didn't have like a whole lot of great options. I have that in air quotes. It was sort of like, well, I guess here's where we are. We got a few choices, And so he went to his freshman year of college and he hated it. He hated it. And we tried to make it like, this is so great. This is so exciting. He hated it. He transferred his second semester of his freshman year. He still did not like it. I mean, both were good institutions, like seemingly could have been great fits for lots of people. And he decided after his freshman year of college, he didn't want to go back to school. And just to watch people's reaction when he made that choice was so telling, as he sort of came out about not wanting to go back to school for his sophomore year of college. People had a lot of, it was such an awkward experience because people didn't know how to be with it. They were like, oh,
that's okay.
Oh yeah, okay, great. So you're really learning about yourself. And it's like, you could just feel how scared they were.
I mean, I've been there.
Yeah, to be in the presence of someone who's like going off the roadmap. Like, what are you doing right now? And he ended up moving for what would have been his sophomore year of college into an apartment with his sister in Brooklyn, New York, while she was finishing school. And that was a really, really tough year. Then, of course, we had the pandemic. I mean, he's still sort of like, he's making music, he's doing these different things, but there's not like a clear trajectory, and as parents, that's destabilizing in my experience. We like to know that our kids are like getting a game plan of some sort together. And by the way, we like to know that for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is like, we don't want to be responsible for eternity,
For that, exactly.
Yeah. And so it makes sense to me. And I just kept trusting he's right where he's supposed to be. He's in some kind of process. I trust his process. I get curious as I feel compelled, and I take responsibility for doing that in a way that is workable, that doesn't create a wedge between us. And as you know, like, seemingly out of nowhere 4 months ago, after having taken some acting classes over the course of the pandemic, he decides he's going to audition for a school called Lambda, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts. And it's like, I mean, it literally was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
I mean, he had,
which by the way, is the kind of place people like dream about their entire like childhoods, and they're like planting the seeds to get there. And like, it's a big deal thing. Yeah. So here's Ray, who for 3 years ago was like making music, making beats.
Yeah. Well, and really when he went to college, he's like, I think I'll be like a sports broadcaster. Like, I like sports. Maybe that's a good idea. And I was like, nope, that's not it. And then he's like, oh, it turns out I like making music. Okay, great. And then it's like, you know what? Actually, my love is acting. And all of a sudden he's saying he wants to go get a bachelor, I don't know, some kind of Bachelor of Arts in professional acting in London. And I'm like, really? So long story short, he gets into the school. I mean, 3,500 applicants a year, 30 people get in, it's in London. And 2 years ago, he thought college was just the dumbest thing in, the entire human society. And so I guess what I share that story because it's been such a living walk for me to trust his process and to really see him as a powerful creator and agent of his own reality that does not need me saving him and meddling him, but really needs me to love and support him, which by the way is very different than enabling. I have loved and supported him the entire way, and it's not been without my own fear, but my fear is mine to manage.
Talk about that a little bit, the fears you were having. And also, I just want to point out, because I was on this journey with you, so I know from the inside, is that it was also not without boundaries. It was also not without like agreements that you had in place, like, fine, you're going to quit school. And inside of that construct, these are the ways in which you're, I need you to be. So talk about some of the fears you were having and how you navigated those.
Yeah, I mean, I had so many fears. It's like, I worked tirelessly as a young parent to basically have my children be these sort of like um, poster children of triumph and of redemption and of possibility. And it's like, you all are off the fucking script right now. Like, what is happening? You know?
Like your
And I mean,
dad.
yeah, totally. And it's all very subtle and
Yeah.
sophisticated and underground. But, so I was very aware of that fear. Oh, great. Now I am the, teenage mom that produced children that are not, checking boxes.
Yep.
And so, I mean, that was definitely present. The fear of like, well, how's he going to support himself? And I'm not going to support him forever. And the fear of being overly critical, overly controlling, it's just a lot to balance as a parent. Yeah. Like, I think we have these pendulum swings from like, you're free. I celebrate the beautiful expression of who you are, to like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? And like, oftentimes there's not always a lot of balance or like equanimity in that. We can sort of have these pendulum swings. And again, like, that's my responsibility. It is not his responsibility to take care of my emotional sobriety. It is my responsibility to take care of my emotional sobriety and to be in right relationship with what is occurring. And if there are boundaries that I need to set or establish, so be it. And we've done that. And it's been a work in progress. It's been a beautiful process. It's been a journey.
So you just said like this key term that I want to talk about is a be in right relationship to that which is occurring. Mm-hmm. And I would like us to talk a little bit about that, because I'm not sure that everyone really understands what that means. Again, that word right has like a connotation of good, bad, right, wrong. So what do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, when I use the word right in that context, it's like a right that has no opposite. It's a right that has no wrong. It's like, it's a space, it's a presence. It's a, right relationship means like, I am in a state of wholeness and I am anchoring myself in love and peace versus control, domination, oppression, suppression, like manipulation. It's like, I'm in right relationship first and foremost with myself. If I am experiencing fear as a parent, that is mine to deal with. It is not my child's responsibility to now take on managing my fear. Rest assured that if we create children who are now all of a sudden responsible for their parents' emotional state, you are ripe for all kinds of dysfunction.
Codependence, right there.
Totally. And so I have to be in right relationship with what is actually happening on planet Lola. And then and that's a process. And I have a network of support that I go to for that. There's a whole, that doesn't just it doesn't happen just because I'm now in right relationship with myself. It's like, no, that's a lot of practice.
It's practice. And I think the most important thing you talked about there is like, being in right relationship is really just, it's about being self-aware. Mm-hmm. It's noticing like, oh, I have some fear. I had this with Robert the other day recently, because he's also he's not finished with college, and he hates college, and he's like, I'm done. I don't want to do this thing anymore. And I could feel this flood of fear moving through me, even though I completely believe that college is not for everyone. There's still a fear that lives in me around him not finishing college. And I could feel that, like, my whole body heated up, my heart started racing. And I just said to him, like, I notice fear is here now. And I have a story that you should. And, he got a little activated. He's like, you're so hypocritical. I go, I'm not actually telling you I think you should. I'm just sharing with you what's happening here on planet Anne Marie. I don't actually know if it's true or untrue. I just know that's what's happening over here. And it's such a gift, I think, for us to model for our kids being in right relationship, like
Mhm.
this belongs to me. Now I could
Mhm.
project it over onto you and start controlling you and threatening you and
Mhm.
making you ease the fear
Mhm.
that's in this body,
Mhm.
or I could just be in right relationship to it and name it as my own and get curious about it.
Mhm.
And I don't know what it means. I could be right,
Mhm.
actually,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? I could be wrong. I don't
Mhm.
know. But the way we stay attached to our fears is, I think, the biggest hook in parenting that we need, that would serve us to unwind.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it is such a journey of acceptance, you know?
Mhm.
It's like, can I accept that he is exactly where he needs to be? Can I accept that I
Yes.
am the right and perfect parent for him? Can I accept all the fear that's coming up in me? Can I it's like, and when I can't, can that be okay? You know? And it's just a it's a very potent relationship, our relationship with our children, and they are our great mirrors for our own fears and need for control. And yeah, I mean, the work that I'm doing within myself right now is, um, I am safety. Like, I am
Mm,
safety. Like, safe,
mhm.
you said this earlier, safety is not out here in, these circumstances. It's like safety is actually, it's not even what I have, it's who I am. And I'm just
Yes.
going to continue cultivating that I am safety. Safety is who I am. And so when I can do that, I can reorganize my central nervous system so that it's not so reactive, no, it's not so activated, not so scared all the time. And it's like it's all is well. All is well.
And when you are doing that, you are creating the opportunity for coherence so
Mhm.
that the system, right, the family system, the relationship, so that your children, your spouse, whomever's in your energy field can, connect to that energetic experience of
Mhm.
all is well. Because
Mhm.
essentially, if all our kids did was tether to our nervous system
Oh
and
my
feel
gosh.
safe and secure, it's like, think about it when they're two, when we like go to the playground and they're holding our leg and we're like, no, you're okay, go
Mhm.
ahead. It's just a series of letting them go, letting them go, letting them go,
Mhm.
go and grow
Mhm.
over and
Mhm.
over again. And to the extent that
Mhm.
we're like, you're right, stay here, don't go play. You might get hurt on the swings. You might
Mhm.
do that. Like,
Mhm.
they're going to resonate with that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I just love this idea of you pointing to, like, coming back to myself, remembering that I'm safe in here. And, Diana, who is one of our mentors and
Mhm.
coaches, she gave me a piece of advice about 5 or 6 years ago. She said the greatest piece of advice she ever got was to say to her kids, like, I trust you.
Mhm.
I trust you. And I use that almost every day. Ashley's making her college decision right now, and she has a question about something. And last night I caught myself like giving her advice, and,
Mhm.
because there's a belief in me about what I think
Mhm.
the right thing to do. And by the way,
Mhm.
like, if I were her, I'd want to do that thing because I'm like,
Mhm.
that sounds fun. Like, why don't you want to do that thing? And all of a sudden last night, I'm like, damn, there I go again. It's like, and I just sent her a quick note and I said, I trust you to make the best decision you can for yourself right now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I could feel like it was like taking the air out of a balloon, like my whole system relaxed. And I
Mhm.
imagine hers did. I don't know if it did, but I imagine it
Mhm.
did. And if we could just do that over and over again, I think we'd
Mhm.
be giving ourselves and our children a really amazing gift.
Totally. Yeah, and I think that that's the power of listening to our intuition. We've become very fractured from our intuitive knowing as a
Yeah.
society and as a culture, and it's really such a brilliant tool that we have access to, because there are times where we as parents, I think, do see something that our kids may not see, and I do believe we have a responsibility to share that. And the question is always, how do I share this? From where am I sharing this? Am I sharing this to be a space of generosity, of care, of love, or is it control, anxiety, fear? The extent to which we can notice in ourselves what's true We recently moved our 13-year-old from one junior high to another school. And I think my husband and her were sort of like on the fence as to whether or not that was a good idea. But I just felt deeply certain in me that was what was necessary. And I wasn't really open to it being a popularity contest. And I made that shift, and it's been a really, really good move. And everyone would agree to that. And so there is a deep knowing and an intuition that we have that we can listen to. It's just not ours to always impose or control
Mhm.
our children's lives out. It's certainly not when it's coming from fear or fear alone.
Right. I think it's paying attention to intuition versus control. I think they're two very different things. And I think having the skill of learning to listen deeply
Mhm.
and recognize when you're in those places of fear and control is probably, well, for me, that's the most valuable lesson I've learned on my parenting journey,
Mhm.
is really how to discern the difference between, you know, that deep voice of intuition and knowing and that
Mhm.
voice of fear.
Mhm. Yeah, and I always say the more you listen to it, the easier it becomes to trust it.
Yeah.
So when that's a new practice, when you're used to outsourcing your certainty to the voices of other people, when you stop that and you start listening more deeply to your gut or your intuition, it feels incredibly risky and very unnerving. And so, if you are experiencing that, I'd be like, you're right on track. That's exactly right. And the more you do it, the more you will trust it. That's certainly true for me. The more I listen to and every time I override it and things go as I sense they would, I'm like, you
Yeah.
know that you can trust you.
And it's okay. It's okay. Like,
Totally.
it's fine. So, what do you
Yeah.
think the biggest lesson you've learned about yourself on your parenting journey has been?
My kids miss nothing. They are so incredibly observant. I mean,
Mm,
that's the fun part about having adult children now. They will reflect back to me my own patterns that I thought I was being like pretty slick about. They can see aspects of me that I can't always see so clearly. And I see them as my great teachers and allies in that way. And I think that that's probably the greatest learning, is realizing that I'm just here to be a collaborator with them and not like a dictator. I mean, we would call my grandmother a benevolent dictator growing up. Like, my mom's the oldest of 9 kids. I'm the oldest of 25 grandchildren. My grandmother was a flipping badass. I have nothing but deep, deep respect for her. And there were a lot of people involved. So she like kept a really tight ship. And there were so many gifts that came from that. And I just relate to my kids not as people that I have to keep in line, but rather as like incredibly creative, brilliant collaborators that I get to form a life with, that hopefully we can all enjoy. And that's probably the greatest lesson I've learned through parenting them.
mm. Any nuggets of wisdom for any parents listening in?
Yeah, I would say like deep forgiveness for all the ways that we fall short of our own insane standards for how and who we want to be as parents. I mean, just
Mm,
so much grace and compassion and care and forgiveness for all of the ways that we fall short of these very unrealistic ideals that we hold for ourselves.
mm,
Like, I really do believe, even in my dad's most heartbreaking fracture in relationship with me, that he really was doing the best that he could. And the more that I can extend grace and compassion and forgiveness in that relationship, it's just like a boomerang effect back to me. It's like,
mhm.
can I extend that grace, compassion, love, forgiveness with and for myself when I do things that are maybe not as great as I would have hoped for as a parent?
Yeah, you
And
said
can
it
that be
earlier.
okay?
We're just doing the best we can
Yeah.
in every moment.
Yeah.
Well, I want to like, my heart is beating really fast right now. So I think I'm feeling so much love and appreciation for you, first and foremost, for the friendship that we have, for the model you are as a parent to me, for the support you've given me over, the last number of years through the parenting journey, for the mirror that you've been, the sounding board you've been, but also, like, you renew my faith in the next generation, because when I see the results of the children that you're raising in the world, like who they are in the world, these confident, loving, open-hearted, expanded human beings. One of the things we didn't touch on here, and we did in our last conversation, is how much love there is in your family system, how your first two older children and your younger children, even though they're not from the same fathers, and they're in a blended family, and there's all sorts of things that can come with that. How much love there is in that family system, how much freedom you give your kids to be who they are. I have faith in the next generation, and I really am grateful.
Yeah, thank you for seeing that and acknowledging that and celebrating that. And I feel very similarly. I'm so grateful for your friendship. I mean, I think back to the Conscious Parenting Summit that we did
Oh, right, I
at
forgot.
the beginning of our friendship, and just how devoted you have been to this conversation for yourself and for all the people that benefit from it. I'm profoundly inspired by your commitment to your work in the world, and just the mama bear that you are with your kids. That's a huge, huge gift, and for all the people that you love. So I'm grateful to be among them. Thank you.
Love you madly.
Love you too.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, check me out at lolarwright.com. I'm active on social media, primarily Instagram at Lola P. Wright. I do send out daily text messages that are like little love notes, a voice memo and a text message with a monthly theme. So if you want to get a daily text from me, you can text "I'm in" to 773-923-0358.
Do that. They're so nourishing, and you get a little bit of Lola love every day. You don't want to miss it.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
Bye, my friend.
Love you.
Love you too.